So we are meeting now in Pisces, where one of the very important themes is liberation. And if we were to look only at the world of illusion in which we live, what's going on around the planet, we would certainly acknowledge the suffering that is happening all over around the world. So in Pisces, we will as a group continue to follow the path of discipleship with detachment and renunciation, leading to eventual liberation from the bondage of matter. A long process. So let's begin with this beautiful mantra that we're given in the Ageless Wisdom teachings. May the holy ones whose disciple I am, whose disciples we are, show us the light we seek. Give us the strong aid of their compassion and their wisdom. There is a peace which passeth understanding. It abides in the hearts of those who live in the eternal. There is a power which maketh all things new. It lives and moves in those who know the self as one. May that peace brood over us, that power uplift us, till we stand where the one initiator is invoked, till we see his star shine forth. So we're meeting today, and we'll meet again next Saturday in Aries to tie the two signs together as we leave the year of the convocation, which we're closing out now in Pisces, and begin the long trajectory with this annual cycle beginning in Aries as we consider these themes. Formula 1, the hint and the teachings around creating in the light from that point of darkness. What we've integrated in terms of detachment and sacrifice, and how we begin to dispel illusion of wrong perception with goal fitness and discipline, and fusion as a means to develop the inspiration, imagination, and illumination that are part of the leading up to the initiatory path in the third initiation, with humility. We'll talk briefly about death as not death as the physical death, but as the power of repulsion, so that we can view what's going on in the world around us, the great illusion, as repulsion of those lower and the infusion of the higher light into the world around us. And it is sacrifice through suffering, and remind ourselves that that is one of the purposes of Sanat Kumara, the silent watcher, and that we are tasked with bringing in the will to good as goodwill. And we'll continue these into Aries and focus on the techniques of fusion, isolated unity, inclusive reason, and presented attributes as the ways in which we can begin to achieve soul fusion, not only for ourselves, but in group formation. We've reviewed the teachings from Esoteric Psychology, Volume 1 on detachment, and need to be remembered always that this testing is not applied, as some think, because of our affiliation with any group or because of our one-pointed determination to tread the path, that it's applied because our own souls, the soul ordains it prior to our incarnation. And it is the will of the soul that we each will have a certain measure of growth, hitherto unknown, that we will attain a status hitherto not attained, and a certain degree of detachment from form will be achieved by each of us. And that we are on this higher turn of the spiral that we hope to maintain, facilitating that soul purpose on behalf of humanity to be part of the new group of world servers. And we will each have a certain preparation that will lead to the liberation from the form life. I think the lesson of this is to not compare ourselves to other individuals or what we perceive, but to listen carefully to each other and listen carefully to the groups that we're part of, to become more and more aware and more understanding of how this attainment and the degrees of attachment and growth are occurring simultaneously across all of these group efforts that we're part of, and actually within this realm of group crisis in the world as it is coming today. The ultimate, as we learned in this teaching, is that complete detachment and discrimination must finally lead us to this condition of complete aloneness. And that is, he says, a horror of that point, which is achieved at the fourth initiation of moving into the life on the Buddhic plane, becoming soul identification, and that we're, most of us, far away from that, but to acknowledge that there are those among us who are at that point, and they are treading that path. So we learn from each other, we learn from them, we learn from our group work, how to support each other and to move together as one. So would anyone like to share the focus on detachment, what's been brought to the fore in your consciousness? We had some ideas shared, and I will create an opportunity, making each of you a co-host, that you can unmute yourself to share if you wish at this point. One person shared with me privately this ability or the purpose of their writing, of the journaling, of the characterizing of where they are in this process of detachment, and then bringing that into group work, bringing it into the opportunity with an ongoing in-person group. Would anyone else like to share something that's been brought to the fore in their consciousness through this process of detachment?
One thing that I learned a long time ago had to do with the psychological implications of detachment, that it's really an interesting dynamic in terms of mm, transmuting perception about need, and that it, there's we think of detachment in terms of releasing in many ways, and that's good, but there's also an impulsing that takes place with detachment that, in my experience, has meant a lot about faith, faith in the unseen, and uh, uh, closing a gap between the soul and the form. And so detachment for me, even though it begins with the D, moving away from, there's when we see it as an impulse towards something greater, which we ourselves may not even be able to put into words, so far beyond an agenda. It goes
That
to obedience again.
that just perfectly describes what DK puts before us is when the will comes into play. It is a power of repulsion to a new the impulse of the higher. There's a magnetization that occurs that you're describing at each point of detachment. That is that it's a drawing up and away and bringing the good, or moving to another higher point. It's really
So,
truth. There's a truth
thank
there.
you. Thank you. It's great.
You know, when I listened to you say that, Martha, what occurred to me was that higher comes into sharing and generosity, because sometimes that detaching is involved with giving and giving it forward. And it's always extraordinary when I sort of find myself in a place where I'm being asked for something that I feel in some way attached to. And when I let that go and give it forward, all I can say is that there is a true sensation of uh, of goodwill, maybe, or but there's a real sensation. It isn't even a mental, oh, I gave that on, and that's good of me. There's a real, almost, I can't even tell you what it is. It's a sensation of knowing that that was done properly, maybe.
Thank you. So we focus on this first rule of action, pure intention. And there was a really wonderful sharing that occurred when we were reviewing the technique of the presence. And this pure intention establishing a new rhythm. And this idea that in using the technique of the presence, we become aware of our weaknesses as well as our strengths. And the idea was put forward that it is for, many people who've worked in different organizational structures, it's this, what is called the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats analysis. It's called the SWOT analysis. And we had a discussion about pure intention and pure motive and how those then can be defined individually, but then how this pure intention that DK talks about as the first rule of action establishes a new rhythm. So I'll just move through this, it does introduce ways in which intention moves to action. And this need to establish this rhythmic, cyclic breath of consciousness that we are part of. And he gives the instructions in terms of the inhalation is for focus and centralization of the pure intention. And in Pisces, our intention is to reveal the light of life itself, ending forever the darkness of matter. And we're focusing on that first hint to lead us from darkness to light. And in Pisces, how is this occurring for us as individuals and as groups? So that pure intention, is it to initiate? Is it to infuse? Is it to inquire, inform, instruct, indicate, interpret, induce, intuit, intuition, inculcate or instill, which means an idea, attitude, or habit through persistence practice or repeated efforts to impress upon the mind. How often are we impressing upon the mind of humanity to reveal the light of life itself? Is it to influence? Is it to inspire? Is it to innovate? Pause for a moment. Are there certain words that come forth as your own practice or in relation to the groups with which you're working? We'll come back to this. So just to affirm our intention in this entire series, our aim is to embody spiritual discernment, to practice positive harmlessness, and eventually achieve a state of divine indifference as we dispel illusion, dissipate glamours, devitalize Maya in all of our relationships. So we're working with the law of cycles in our own lives, in the life of any related group, and in the life of humanity itself. So let us, in the coming year, in this cycle, follow DK's instructions, because our own lives and our groups and the life of humanity are closely related. And closely related to the rhythm of breathing. He tells us it might be regarded in the following way, and says to us, hold these suggested relations in mind. On the inhalation, achieving focus and life centralization. And that is bringing the first ray and the second ray into a unity with life centralization. On the interlude, at the point as the inhalation ceases, there is an initiation of causes. On the exhalation, a crisis and production of effects. And he tells us to study effects. And then at the end of the exhalation, there's another interlude. A recognition, a prelude to the refocusing. So let us today consider this in Pisces as our number 4, our interlude, where there is a recognition, a prelude to our refocusing in Aries. These phases of activity, DK says, both positive and negative, can be applied in all aspects of life and in all activities. We can experience them and institute them as a personality, and the entire effect of these phases will then be contained within the personality life of the 3 worlds. And he goes on to say that we are meanwhile in the process of learning them as a soul and as a disciple. And he advises in this excerpt from Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2, that for the remainder of the life, we should establish the rhythm of our effort. And then on the path of initiation, we relearn this same process on the highest possible turn of the spiral within the planetary rhythm. That sort of lays out this is a whole process in many containers of life as it's defined. And each one is contained within a larger, and then a lot greater and a greater. So always in my own thinking, pure intention involves tension, which is defined as that moment of exquisite sensitivity, which appears just as the life within reaches the point of breaking forth into the light. And I included this because we are told that humanity, we are now as humanity breaking forth into the light. Humanity as a whole is in this initiatory process, which is over decades, centuries, and this process of the loss or the death, the repulsion from the previous civilization, and then the dawning of the new civilization. We are right on that cusp and will be. In one place he says it's 200 years, and in another place he says it's 275 years. So we are all in the process of, becoming into this great initiation of humanity. Ellen, would you share this reading with us?
The disciple, recognizing that their integration is weak, for they are working in two phases or sections, physical, emotional, and mental, soul, sometimes one and sometimes the other, and usually very thoroughly in either case. This duality must be brought into a closer relation, and this is the point to which he must attend as he seeks to establish and preserve the needed synthesis and personality-soul integration. Think the transition we are in, the complicated transitional esoteric astrology that leads in the Aquarian age to the new astrology, the science of relations, triangles, centers, and the rays with esoteric understanding. When will disciples learn that the attitude which involves a certain don't care reaction and a form of indifference is one of the quickest ways by which to release the self from personality claims? This is not the don't care spirit which will affect the disciple's attitude to other people. It is the attitude of the integrated thinking personality of the disciple towards the astral or emotional body. It leads him to assume the position that not one single thing which produces any reaction of pain or distress in the emotional body matters in the very least. These reactions, the soul engineers this reactive identification, are simply recognized, lived through, tolerated, and not permitted to produce any limitation. All disciples would do well to ponder what I have just said. The whole process is based on a deep-seated belief in the persistence of the immortal being within the forms of soul and personality.
Ellen, would you think through your own experience, and do you have a noticing of the ways in which the healing service assists in moving, assisting others in moving to that point of detachment?
Well, I think in one way, like when I'm seeing a client and they're talking about an issue in their life or an experience, and the focus is on the pain or the discomfort or the emotional discomfort, that sometimes just being listened to, or it sometimes comes to me something to say, they say, oh, I didn't think of it that way. Like for what I'm noticing now, my brother-in-law died just a couple months ago, and he became very debilitated from a brain disorder. And the courage with which his immortal being persisted in his physical form while he was deteriorating was stunning to me. And so I stayed so near to him for months. Anytime I was free, I was near him, because it was like his soul was just like the candle inside the globe. It was, even though everything around him and people around were feeling really, really, of course, sad, and I would say he's our teacher. The way he is, the way he is in light of what's happening to him is stupendous. So it went from, oh, woe is him, and isn't this awful, to a point of elevation of his immortal being within his physical form that was struck with a especially difficult, debilitating illness. So and just the other day was talking to someone whose many members of her family have health issues, and her thoughts are often, I'm going to be so sad when they die. So the sadness that she will feel when they die, but they're not actively dying, they're not in hospice, they're not at the end of their life, kind of consumes her. The anticipatory sadness, or the focus on the sadness, takes away from they're here today. So I think part what I see is how much emotion becomes at the forefront, afraid of having a hard emotion, or having a hard emotion, or remembering having a hard emotion, and how that takes away from richness of a moment of the presence of that person. So that's what comes to mind.
Thank you. And I would like all of us to sort of consider this ideas, because it's really can be attributed to any one of a number of moments that we've had in this unreal world with groups, with nations, moving beyond the pain and the distress in a way that signifies the presence of the soul in that group or in that nation, that they are recognizing, they're living through, they're tolerating, but they're not allowing that to limit what they do from the soul personality point. And I think when we pause, we can see that in many instances around us. So we assume this attitude of indifference, and we radiate the triple light then when we're working with the astral field to dissipate the glamours that are present and reveal the soul qualities required. And in doing this, we're expressing a kind of building of the antakarana. And we do this, we really affirm it when we're practicing the technique of the presence. So at the March equinox, we'll institute a new cycle of growth in soul consciousness and service in doing this, and seek ever to become more the observer. Now, Ben, would you read this teaching from Glamour, a World Problem?
Become the observer. I teach no mode of awakening the centers, because right impulse, steady reaction to higher impulsions, and the practical recognition of the sources of inspiration will automatically and safely swing the centers into needed and appropriate activity. This is a sound method of development. It is slower, but leads to no premature development and produces a rounded out unfoldment. It enables the aspirant to become truly the observer and to know with surety what he is doing. It brings the centers one by one to a point of spiritual responsiveness, and then establishes the ordered and cyclic rhythm of a controlled lower nature. That breathing exercises may eventually find a place in the training of the disciple is true and possible, but they will be self-initiated as a result of rhythmic living and a constant right use of the sacred word, the Om. When, for instance, a disciple in meditation sounds the Om 7 times, it is the equivalent of a breathing exercise. When he can send the energy thus generated on the wings of conscious planned thought to one or other of the centers, he is bringing about changes and readjustments within the mechanism that handles force. And when this can be carried out with ease and with the mind held at a point of thoughtful tension, then the disciple is well on the way to shifting his entire focus of attention away from the world of illusion, glamour, and Maya, and into the realm of the soul, in the world of the clear, cold light, and into the kingdom of God.
In our work and in our group service, we oftentimes will sound the Om. And in my own practice, I started, actually many years ago, in sounding the great invocation to use the Om 7 times. There are 3 at the end, but to insert an Om after each sentence, which adds up to 7. And my own experience of this is that it enables a connectivity into the centers of the group. And it is, depending on the group, it is a thoughtful tension then, holding the mind at that point that can assist and I think is useful if you find that you're having difficulty, relating to a particular center within the groups, and to use your own strategies to bring this observer to the fore and to be able to achieve really quite a level of detachment from the goings on within a group. And I find for myself, particularly with the all of the attention that we're putting toward particular groups on the physical plane, whether it be nations or individual actors, alliances that are working, that it allows for a level of detachment and the altitude of the observer kicking in. It's just sharing from my own practice how this can work. Frida, are you able to lead us through this part?
I will try to do that. This is very small. I only have my phone now.
Well, let's ask Catherine then to do it.
Yeah, okay.
Assume the attitude of the observer. Envision your etheric body, your aura, which includes your health aura. Envision your astral emotional aura. And finally, your mental aura, encapsulating your expressed etheric radiance and your place upon the path of evolution. Your personality instrument. See the outline of these spheres, these auras, in a unity. Now imagine the interconnections, the elemental and Davic streams, flowing, relating, connecting these auras as a single unified field, and sound the words of Roberto Assagioli. I have a body. I am not my body. I have emotions. I am not my emotions. I have a mind. I am not my mind. Now lift the attention within these united spheres to the highest point, the deepest point of life within your being, the soul, and say, I am the soul. I am light divine. I am love. I am will. I am fixed design. We know that an ashram is a place of quietly, confident, regulated effort. The plan and the immediate service activity are known, and disciples and initiates, each aware of his task and equipment, proceed to carry out the phase of the one work which is theirs. Each senses its relationship to the phases of the work undertaken by his group brothers. It is learning to see the picture whole, as the master ever sees it, that confidence and security are developed. Standing in relation to the ashram, sense the channel of energies flowing to and from the hierarchy along the Antakarana. Drawing on the love, intelligence, and will of the ashram, we establish a point of tension, focused, immovable will as units of service within the one world serving group. We consider our standing as a group and follow the technique of indifference. We enter into a beam of directed, focused light, revealing a greater light and illumining the way to the center of the light, directing our way. Daily contact the vibratory resonance of the angel of the presence and bring the integrating light, love, and will to good into and through your being and into our group field of endeavor, aligning with and serving the plan. Unite. Unite the light of the personal self focused in the mind, the light of the soul focused in the angel, and the universal light which the presence emits. From the triangle of soul qualities that you affirm as the gift waves of your integrated personality under the light of the soul, rise on this beam to draw into the soul body the radiant, directed, and focused light, guiding us into the presence and identification as being. Lead us, O Lord, from darkness to light. This inner realization grows with the development of power in meditation, whether it is individual meditation or group work. meditation is essential for establishing a freer inner spiritual interplay. Again, whether as a soul in relation to the personality or a group of disciples in relation to the master or each other.
So let us now experience these triangles of interplay out to and including our individual relationship on an ashramic level to the soul or to the master, from that great beacon of light out and through all of our service groups, those physical plane groups with which we serve. And out to all the nations that we represent, and out to the entire body of humanity. We stand in spiritual being, and as the soul we serve. We stand within the light, and in that light we see light. This is the light that brings the darkness into day. And we continue to use the formulas or the hints that are given from the universal creative aspect. Our focus was in Aquarius and in Pisces and again in Aries. Formula 1, the transition from darkness to light, creation in the light. And this is called the pattern that concerns integration into the ashram, and it concerns the revelation of group feeling. It is related to sensitivity and conditions, the life of the ashram. This is our focus in Pisces and will be in Aries. We're told that if we follow these hints with spiritual exactitude, it reveals our soul-intended life pattern, and this will be an expression of the higher life purpose. Remembering that we're seeking to move to the Buddhic plane and into the life of the spiritual triad, which is the life of the ashrams. And we move from the monastic permanent atom into the angel of the presence, the soul, as the light that we serve and follow. And from that place, we are able to bring through impressions. Andrea, would you continue?
These hints I will convey to you in the ancient symbolic formulas, which will require much deep reflection on your part and an effort to invoke the intuition and thus arrive at the three meanings which they hold for you and for disciples like you. There are literally 7 meanings, but I would advise you to confine yourself to the comprehension of the first 3. There will be 1 meaning for your personality, indicating certain brain and mind realizations, which are essential for the right transmission of force upon the physical plane, one of the first things an initiate has to master. There will be the soul meaning, which will indicate relation to the hierarchy, in the same way that the personality significance will indicate relationship to humanity. Then there will be a still higher meaning, which will be exceedingly difficult for you to grasp, but for which you must strive, and which will necessitate the consciously acquired use of the Antakarana. You will understand, therefore, why the study of the science of the Antakarana forms part of my instruction to this group. No major initiation can be taken until there is some measure of conscious use of the Antakarana.
And throughout this annual cycle that we're entering into, we'll continue with some point of emphasis in relation to the building of the Antakarana. So I encourage each one of us to investigate, meditate, discern to the extent that we can these 3 meanings.
Two major ideas emerge from a careful study of the formulas: pattern and transition. It is upon these two that I would ask you to reflect constantly. In past years, I have frequently called your attention to the necessity of a vital and active program formulated by you and self-initiated by you, and therefore in these tabulations, you have much that can throw light upon that necessity and upon the lines along which the program should go. You must remember ever that the program of a disciple and of an ordinary aspirant are not in any way identical. Program will, if followed with spiritual exactitude, reveal your soul-intended life pattern, and this will be an expression of a life purpose. This summation of a disciple's life is also the summation of the life of the Lord of the world, whose self-initiated program, implemented by evolutionary energy and steadily revealing the pattern of things to come, is increasingly known as an expression of the divine initial purpose.
In identifying for yourself in your own contemplation and in relation to the group work and service you've done, you can take what he gave us as those 3 meanings and reflect on the patterns and the transitions in the development of your personality and your personality service and work and assignments in this life on the physical plane. You can look at the pattern and the transitions in relation to your own development of soul life, in relation to your soul, and then potentially reveal a still higher meaning of how you have developed an ability to create in the light and to work in group formation to create in the light. So in Pisces, we have focused on the light of the world, revealing the light of life itself, ending forever the darkness of matter. And we would usually, with the old astrology, look at our own chart. And someone might say, well, I don't have any planets in Pisces. I don't have any, relationships in Pisces. They would look at their own chart. And what DK tells us in esoteric astrology is that we're in this complicated transitional time, so that we're moving into soul astrology and the new astrology, which will be the science of relationships. So what I encourage you to do is to think of Pisces in relation to the way in which your life pattern and transitions have begun to reveal to you the light of life itself. Those points at which this light of life itself emerged in a transition or in a particular life expression, ending forever, eventually, the darkness of matter as one attends to that particular light that was revealed. And rather than, trying to ask any one of us to share an experience, but I do believe those in our group have a sense of that. But let us think of, individuals. And I'm going to use one that is not used ordinarily, but it's a light that I think we could see. And it was the triangle of Martin Luther King and his relationship with other faith leaders in other parts of the world, Desmond Tutu, Gandhi, that his relationship, that in his life there came a Piscean moment where the light of life itself was revealed in some way to him. And I think he expressed it in his, I've been to the mountain, right before he was assassinated. And that light, it was a Piscean experience that was a revelation. Not that we as individuals would have had that tremendous experience, but to encourage us to think about how we look at the transitions. And that's why in looking forward, DK tells us that we won't be using the charts, our natal charts. We'll be using different charts that will actually reveal these opportunities. Getting back to Ben's analysis that the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats, those moments when you do that analysis and you look at those points in your own experience or in experience of a group or in the experience of a nation or a great alliance, that there are these points in which the Piscean energies come together to reveal the light of life itself. It's just one way to think about it. So DK tells us that we never ever need to remember that at this time, the main technique of the hierarchy is that of conveying inspiration. Just breathe into. And let's look at this representation that was put together by Dwayne Carpenter of the hierarchy. And the hierarchy as the ashram of synthesis, synthesizing all of these ashramic relations. And there are 343 that we know of at this time. And breathe into that inspiration that we can from the hierarchy. And then bring into our consciousness this great web, the triangles of light that are activated first within the hierarchy. In this multitudinous, almost infinite web of lighted energy, that is activated by our soul, the one soul through each soul, and souls in relationship to one another, in triangles, bringing the rays and the centers into a synthesis. And as we end this time of Pisces, breathe into points of realization and revelation, that we hold it as an interlude after the exhalation, and gather impressions. Though the masters are not openly lecturing or teaching in the great cities of the world, they are working through us. It will be possible for them to appear increasingly among us and evoke recognition as the influence of Aquarius is more firmly established in the next 200 years or so. The masters, in the meantime, must continue to work within this, the silence of the universal ashram, the ashram of synthesis. And from there, they inspire their workers. And those workers inspire the new group of world servers, the one world serving group, our colleagues that we meet with daily, regularly. So let us achieve some level of goal fitness. And we'll go through these rather quickly, and you can refer to them. DK gives us some teachings that leading us from darkness to light refers us to the mind as it becomes eventually illumined by the light of the intuition. And this illumination is brought about by the means of the technique of the presence with whom the light shines. Ponder on this whole teaching as you move forward in Pisces. We again note this first rule of action: purity of motive, purity of intention, inspired by a loving heart in the healing work. And remember to pledge yourself to the path of love. Daily, hourly, sometimes minute to minute, to be a channel of compassion and an instrument of love, until we know ourselves to be love itself. Be that pure love, serve with pure intent, and in knowledge full, using the mind, we pledge ourselves to that path of love. In the next week, and into Aries, consider how illusion is working out in our world as wrong interpretation. DK gives us this instruction about illusion as primarily a mental quality. And as we look out across the field of world activities, we know that this is occurring today. And if those, particularly around the second initiation, this is involved and must ever be recognized by a useful, dedicated life and expressed determination to enter the field of world service. But it requires humility and a voiced realization of the divinity in all. Humility can teach the needed sense of proportion. So as we witness what appears to be widespread destruction of ideas and ideals, let us find that sense of proportion and recognize wrong interpretation and bring into the field the cures that are given to us in this teaching from Glamour, a World Problem, to eliminate the glamours that create this wrong interpretation. Jot down as you move forward in Pisces and into Aries how this is occurring. And use service by radiation. We're told that this is the way. And we must evoke the latent will and develop it and control it so that we can be open in time to the monadic influence of divine purposeful will. And that true humility is based on fact, on vision, and interestingly, on time pressures. It gives us a hint here that asks us to think deeply on these foundations of a major personality attitude that must be held and demonstrated before each initiation, and hold in your consciousness humanity is going through this initiation. Reminding us there must always be humility in the presence of true vision. So how do we instill humility? We can first become aware of the technique of integration of our personality. Whatever word, possibly more than one word, and then we'll begin to look at the techniques of fusion next week in relation to this. I'll send these out to you so that you can do some consideration before we meet next Saturday in terms of the techniques of fusion. And it will be in relation to the ray of your soul. And we're in a transition as groups and as humanity, transitioning from this focus on detachment as related to the teachings of the Buddha in terms of that which is right. And we're using detachment from selfish desire to, I could say, catapult ourselves into the teachings of Agni Yoga, where goal fitness is defined as this rightness, all of those rightnesses of direction, concentration, mindfulness, right thought, orientation, right understanding, right action, right effort, right livelihood, and right speech, as aptness, as appropriateness to the path, and a striving and an understanding of the application of human action in life. And we'll look at that more closely when we meet again. In Infinity, Book 2 of Agni Yoga, Sloga 282, says to know the significance of being means to be convinced of the goal fitness of existence. And let that be our goal in all the work that we do. So there's this teaching on new methods, new approaches to the human problem, and new modes of work will have to be tried. Let us define, develop, and be these new approaches as they are impressed upon us in this coming cycle. We don't have to abandon what we've been working on, but it is to find the new methods and the new approaches to be used. And these new techniques and the changed approach from that of individual culture to united group progress will bring about many types of development. So that is what we hold for the future in the Aquarian age. Think about the soul qualities that emerge that we haven't mentioned yet. Today, faith was mentioned. A degree of spiritual serenity, achieving that. Trust has been mentioned. Trust in the divine plan. Dedication and tolerance. What else needs to be developed as soul qualities? And it is through the disciples that the new group of world servers are brought under the stepped down Aquarian influences that hierarchy is inspiring. And yes, it is an individual matter, and yes, it is largely dependent upon the point of evolution. And yes, some members of the new group will not respond in any way they cannot, yet others will respond as fully as their spiritual status permits. But this inflow of Aquarian energies is the factor that will enable the Christ to complete his task. So let us hold this as we enter into this age. The influence of Master R, who's now the Mahachohan, to assume that mantle and become the Lord of civilization, conditioned by the rhythm, the breath of the seventh ray that is coming in. So we've looked at this before in terms of this power to relinquish as a focal point for us, and then to see where that is coming from, the Manu and Master Moria, and united with the will to love, the love of God with Master Kuthumi and Master Dwalkul, and then activated and actuated through the intelligence of God that is coming through the Mahachohan, the intelligence of the Aquarian energies. So we organize for the goodwill work, as we talked about in the past, and we test our understanding, where we are in relation to both of the teachings, the Raja Yoga and Agni Yoga. We discussed this before. You can ponder on that in your own rays and how that is bringing to the fore these new opportunities. And just to realize that the extent of the discipline that we are undergoing is settled and known by the soul before we even take a body. It is determined by law. So we cannot judge in any way the actions of another. We can only move through understanding of our own soul purpose in relation to what we're guided to do on that higher level. It's a very difficult concept to settle in one's consciousness as we create in the light. And we maintain the tension of indifference as individuals, as a group, as communities, and hopefully we model it in our relation to our nation. And we intensify the point of tension by the constant recollection of the truth that is the self, the whole soul self, and not the not self, by a process of projection. And this projection through the Antakarana is defined as sending of energy qualified and recognized from the point of tension direct and undeviatingly to the vital etheric body, from whence it can find its way to the 7 centers of control. Very important teaching in relation to how we actuate this point of tension as individuals, as groups, as community, and as a nation, from that altitude of the soul with this indifference, so that we will be able to see clearly in the light of the soul and dispel illusion, that we will be able to project light consciously onto the astral plane and dissipate glamour, and that we will be able to pour light energy through the etheric body and anchor the light or the energy in the appropriate centers, because there will be complete indifference or non-identification with Maya. This is another really significant teaching in relation to our soul contact and involving
daily invocation for Ukraine.
That we can dispel illusion, dissipate glamour, and have complete indifference to the Maya. We've talked before, this is a repeat of the notions of the growth of the group idea, the group good, group understanding, and interrelation. In terms of this new group, the one world serving group that we are identified with, or we hope to be identified with, along all ray lines, and their name is Legion, working in cooperation with those upon the other side of the life we know. So we always connect with this web of light. We lift ourselves daily in our groups to a new unity, and we breathe in the rhythm of the planetary consciousness as we enter into this divine circulatory flow. And we close this focus with withdrawing the focused light, the directed light, from the point of tension. We stand with the group, and as a group, we sound this affirmation. More radiant than the sun, purer than the snow, subtler than the ether is the self, the soul, the spirit within my heart. I am that self am I. Knowing that each life tends to a greater stability, and we continue to work on control of all of those bodies. And next Saturday we'll talk about the entering into Aries, this light of life itself, this dim point of light found at the center of the cycle of manifestation. And we'll continue with these points of focus.